So let's just think back, lads. I mean, this is the time of the season when there isn't one, when you sort of reminisce a little bit, I think, and I just sort of wonder, what your memories are of what it was that drew you to City. I mean, I should start by saying that I haven't got a family history of being City fans. My dad wasn't really that bothered about football, but the memories he's given me of football were that he took his sister, who wanted to see Stanley Matthews play, this is how long ago it was, to the old Burnden Park, to Bolton Wanderers. And I think he played Stanley Matthews for both Blackpool and Stoke, but I think it was when he was at Stoke. And Bolton, now people listening to this will be able to Google this, and maybe I should have looked it up before I started speaking. But it was the day of the Burnden disaster when a lot of people died at Burnden Park, and it was on the railway stand end of the ground. And my dad took me, his sister, my auntie, to the game to see Stanley Matthews. And he tells me that he was looking down from the terraces, and his sister couldn't really see, and he couldn't really see. They could feel the crowd swaying about a bit. And they decided after a while to just give it up as a bad job. And they went back and got on the train, went back to Radcliffe where they both lived. And later found out that this terrible disaster had happened. So the reason I mention that is because my dad had never particularly had an allegiance to City as such. I wouldn't say he had an allegiance to Bolton either. And he didn't have a massive allegiance to any football club. And so I think, well, where did my passion from City come from? And all I can remember is that when I was sort of 5, 6, 7, I had an uncle, Uncle Bernard, who used to come round. He's a big United fan, and I used to have a sort of bantery, teasy relationship with him. And he was always going on about George Best and and being really sort of in a lovable way, because I loved Uncle Bernard a lot, but a bit arrogant really, and I always identified with Colin Bell, this quiet, unsung hero. I liked the colours sky blue, and I always felt that City had humour connected to them, and humbleness and reality to connect to them. And then I made a couple of friends. A lad lived next door called Kevin, who was a City fan, and me and him used to play football in the street, and that sort of that worked. And that's so there was no conscious day when I became a City fan.
It just happened.
But I was just a City fan, and as City in the late 60s was successful, I couldn't go to games until I was 10. Went along to my first game, desperate to go when I did, and the rest is sort of history really. What about you two? You come from different generations.
Yeah.
So what's your story, Paul?
Well, I'm probably the generation after you, Ian, I would suggest slightly.
He's not.
I think when I started being a City fan, football was less tribal then. There was the rivalry between clubs and stuff, but it was less tribal. I remember my dad saying...
was your dad a City fan?
Dad, massive City fan. It was weird really, because my mum was the one that really got me into football. It sounds daft, this. She used to play in a brass band called the Beswick Prize Band. One week they play at Main Road, and then the week after they play at Old Trafford. So that's the kind of how they met through the band and everything. Anyway, she used to sing on the pitch one week at City, played a solo cornet and sing on the pitch. So my gran lived at on Thornton Road, which is kind of backed onto the Kippax car park. So from being a baby, they used to sort of like let me go out in the backyard and open the gate and feed the police horses and stuff like that with sugar lumps. And so I always got the feel for being I was never going to be anything but a City fan. Obviously I could have gone the United fan bit if it wasn't for my gran being at Main Road. If my gran had lived near Old Trafford, I'd have probably gone that way. But basically, with my mum doing what she did, and she had a few contacts there and things, that was it for me. And I always saw United as the big fast track bullies with all the money and all the glitz and the glamour, and City were like the kind of the cowboys in the white uniforms as opposed to United in the dark, and there was like the goodies and the baddies, and City were always the underdogs, and everybody seemed. So I just kind of liked that. I was never going to be anything but a City fan, ever. And the other thing I tend to find is with City fans, you hear a lot of United fans who became City fans. I've never heard of a City fan who became United fan, ever. When I grew up in Failsworth, there was me and my pal Rob Owen. I think we were the only City fans. Everyone else was United. And that was it. We just had to stick together and be City fans. It was great.
What about you, Alan? You're a younger generation, of course.
Yeah, so 25, born in 1993.
You're just a glory hunter.
No, I'm not a glory hunter at all, Ian. Far from it. Born in 93. First ever football ground I visited was Boundary Park, believe it or not. I used to go there with my dad and his friends. My dad's a Blue, but he used to go to the Oldham games every now and again with my Uncle Liam. My granddad's a diehard Oldham fan as well, but my granddad watched City in the 60s. I've learned more about my granddad's support of City the older I've got. Obviously, the more I've sat with him, the more I've spoke to my granddad, the more he's told me about Colin Bell, Tony Butt, other players that he watched throughout the generations. He's talked to me about watching Oldham at Main Road, what it felt like to watch another team play at Main Road, in cup replays and stuff like that. So obviously my knowledge and my awareness of different generations of not only City but Oldham and football in general has obviously grown from listening to my granddad and my dad and my dad's friends and stuff. But the day I became a City fan, I kind of do consciously remember when it was, and it was when me and my dad were driving through Oldham and we were having a chat just on a sunny day, and we were listening to, I think it might have been one of your commentaries, Ian, on GMR as it was then with Fred, and I just remember my dad saying to me, City are playing all right, and I said, oh, does that who you support, Dad? Then I was about 7 or 8 or something like that, and he was like, yeah. I said, but I thought you supported Oldham, Dad. You always go to Boundary Park. And he said, yeah, I can't go to every City game, lad, but I'm a Blue. Like, you're a Blue, and am I? And that was it. And then I was like, oh, I'm a City fan, so I'm going into school at 7, 8 then. Who do you support? Mate? I'm a City fan, me. Well, you shouldn't support City, you should support United. City are rubbish, City will never do anything, this, that and the other. And that kind of drove my support more. The fact that I enjoyed supporting, like you said, Paul, the underdog. And I enjoyed going into school, not after a loss, but knowing that next week we might win next week. And I didn't mind the ribbons because I always knew that something, I didn't know when, I didn't know how, but I knew that something was going to happen, and that one day I'd get to maybe see us lift the Thomas Cook Trophy pre-season and treat it like the Premier League title.
That was the ambition back then.
And UEFA Cup against TNS, that was the best it got at one time, and Lockeren, but that was amazing, do you know what I mean? And just going to the club shop, getting a kit at the start of the season, all them little memories and stuff made being a City fan worthwhile for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you remember a significant game? And I mean, the first game I saw was in 1970. I was a 10-year-old kid. And although there are certain emotions that I associate with that game, and, you know, when City did those memories that are all around the stadium inside, I was lucky enough at one time to have mine up there. And they used some of the quotes where I say things like, I literally could smell the grass, which seems like a strange thing to say. But when you've never been to a football stadium, and you're a kid because your senses are heightened, actually being able to smell the grass, and they used to rub liniment on the legs, and that was a very distinctive smell. Absolutely. Yeah. And then Bovril and pies, and of course everybody smoked in those days, so the aroma of tobacco smoke and all that. So it was all those things. But if I'm being honest, apart from those emotions and maybe the euphoria I remember in the crowd when City scored because they won 5-1 that night, I don't really remember the game because I was only young. The first memory that really sticks in my mind was on the way to the 76 League Cup final when they played Middlesbrough at home and won 4-0. And Main Road was bouncing that night, and Alan Oakes hit a screamer from the edge of the penalty area. And I can remember that game much more distinctly, even though I was only 16. And by then, I think I started to fully understand the game. That's no disrespect to kids, but I started to fully understand the game from probably that point onwards. Was there a moment like that for you? This probably sounds even weirder. When I think of the early days at Main Road and stuff, the smell that rekindles it is the smell of horse muck and hot dogs. Well, especially if you were giving sugar to the police horses.
That was it, because where my gran's backyard opened out, it was like all cobbles, and then it was the car park, and you walk down the cobbles, and it kind of like, there was this like little walled sort of labyrinth I can remember walking down. So obviously the police horses are walking down. Ginnels, yeah. The police horses are walking down there and obviously doing the business. You were dodging that most of the time. You're a little kid, so you'd skipping along next to your dad and he'd dodge it and you'd end up being dragged through it. So, it's like me...
When I see that, I always say, look, there's a United fan there.
Yeah. But no, my first game I remember going to matches. The first game I remember was it was probably Tommy Booth's testimonial. Mike Doyle's testimonial. Was it 78, something like that? 78, 79, something like that. I remember going to that. That's the first game I can ever remember going to. I've been to games before.
How old were you then?
9.
Right.
8 or 9, something like that.
So similar age to when I went.
Yeah. I think when you... I see kids these days. I went to Wembley this year, and there was a kid in front of me, and his dad, he was probably about 7 or 8, and the kid was more interested in the flag, and he must have peeled apart the flags and took the plastic tubing out and opened it up and messed about with it.
He'll end up being a mechanic. That's
exactly.
How they start
that was me.
Taking things apart.
That was me. My dad would get by a program, and by the time he got it back, it was all in pieces, and the pin was out, and the staples out, and everything. But I think when you're about that age, your dad takes you along to it. You're interested in it, but your attention span's not as good. So most kids spend the time messing around. I can remember sort of like, is it up yet, Dad? Can I go home yet? It was that kind of thing. But he made me stay to the end, and that is why, to this day and age, I stayed to the end of the game. I clapped the players off because my dad said, "No, son, we're staying to the end. We clap these players off."
Dads have a lot to answer for.
Absolutely.
Because my dad, who I go